Okay, I want to talk about activity-based costing now. All right, so we talked about that. Okay, so I'm going to start by talking about an example that hopefully you can all relate to some extent to illustrate how activity-based costing, or ABC, is different from traditional costing. I will then give an overview of the activity-based costing method and talk about the cost pools and cost drivers that are part of that method. I will then go through an example to illustrate the calculations for a fictitious battery company. We will then discuss some of how activity-based costing influences decisions, and then talk about when activity-based costing would be useful, because there are costs associated with using it. And then we'll do some practice problems. So let me start with an example that hopefully you can relate to. This example is basically how should you divide utilities costs among 3 people. So let's assume that you have 2 roommates, Pat and Chris, and you want to decide how you divide utilities costs among the 3 of you. Now I know typically you divide those equally among all 3 roommates, but we'll be a little bit unique. And the answer that I want to talk about will depend on what kind of roommate you have. So if Pat and Chris were kind of normal roommates, then maybe you could be a little bit more precise. But if they're not normal roommates, where maybe Pat uses a lot of electrical equipment and Chris does a lot of cooking, then you might think more carefully about how to divide up the utilities. Let me go to a Word document which will be posted on Desire to Learn so that you can look at it later. All right, but basically here's the problem up here. You want to know how much you should save each month so that you have enough to pay for utilities, and also so that you can spend some money on entertainment and other things. So what you might do is you might go to the prior occupants and find out from them what the average utility costs were. And let's assume they give you this information here. All right, so water is $40 per month, gas $100 per month, electricity $90 per month. That's a total of $230 in utilities per month. All right, while most roommates divide utilities equally, you know some things about Pat and Chris that make you nervous about doing so. Specifically, Pat and Chris both work from home and do not have significant others. This means that neither of them showers very often. Since you are planning on showering every day, you expect to consume a disproportionate share of the water. Pat is a techno jock and has a ton of electronic devices for work and for play. Thus, Pat will consume a disproportionate share of the electricity. Chris, on the other hand, loves to cook. Chris spends a lot of time using the gas appliances in the kitchen to test new recipes or to prepare food for the bake sales and farmers markets. Chris, therefore, is expected to consume a disproportionate share of the gas. Now, to help you divide these costs up in an equitable way among the 3 of you, we need to know some of the activities that you each engage in. So here's a list of some different activities. In the first column, we've got a list of each of the 3 roommates and a total. And then we've got the number of showers. Like we said, you shower regularly every day. Pat only 6 times a month, Chris only 4 times a month. Yeah, not very clean. That might be why they don't have significant others. Okay, the number of minutes spent in the shower is also listed here. The number of home-cooked meals, the number of hours spent cooking in the kitchen, the number of electronic devices that you own, and the size of your bedroom in square feet. All right, so like I said, rather than divide those costs up equally among the 3 of you, let's do the following. How much would you expect your utility bill to be if all utilities were allocated based on the number of showers, and we'll also assume that the actual costs and activities were the same as planned? Okay, and this is basically going to mimic the way we allocated overhead for the first test, and it's the traditional method of cost allocation. So in other words, we're going to calculate a predetermined overhead rate and then allocate the cost based on the number of showers here. All right. So what we'll do first is we'll calculate the allocation rate. So we'll take the total amount of utilities, $230, divided by the total number of showers, 40, to get $575 per shower. So the cost for you would be to take the 30 showers that you take times $575 per shower. So that's $172.50 of the full $230. That's really not very fair, right? Here's a breakdown of why this approach is wrong. The calculation of an allocation rate using only one cost driver assumes that you use the same proportion of each utility. It ends up assigning too many costs to you and not enough cost to Pat and Chris. Okay, so in other words, you're basically going to calculate an allocation rate for each of these three different utilities based on the number of showers. So take the $40 divided by 40 showers, that's $1 per shower. $100 in gas divided by 40 showers, that's $2.50 per shower. And then $90 in electricity divided by 40 showers, that's $2.25 per shower. Or what we did, $2.30. You know, if you add up each of these, it'll give us the $5.75 per shower. And then basically we'll take these rates here and we'll say, okay, $1 per shower times 30 showers for you. So you're going to pay $30 of the water bill, of the total $40 water bill. Gas, $2.50 per shower times 30 showers. So that's $75 of the $100 water bill. And then for electricity, $2.25 per shower times 30 showers. So that's $67.50 of the $90 electricity bill. So basically, you're paying 75% or 30/40ths of each of these different utility bills. Whereas Pat and Chris are paying a much smaller proportion for each of the three utility bills. So that is not fair, right? It might make sense for you to pay most of the water bill since you take more showers, but not most of the gas and electricity costs. All right, so now what we want to do is think of a more fair way to divide up the utilities cost. Can you think of how to do that? Take a minute and just go back to the information up here and think about how you could make this more fair. You could stop the video and just think about it for a minute. Okay, well here's what we're going to do. We're going to use a separate cost driver or allocation base for each utility. And this is the key, well, one of the key features associated with activity-based costing. Now, because you are not required to use any specific cost driver for each utility, answers will vary. But here's one possible answer. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to continue allocating water in proportion to the number of showers taken. So I'll take the total water bill, divide it by 40 showers for the month, so that's still $1 per shower. That part's the same. But now for gas, I'm going to use number of hours spent cooking in the kitchen as my cost driver. So where does this 200 come from? If I go back up to this activity table here, it's this 200 right here. Okay, there's a total of 200 hours that are spent cooking in the kitchen. All right, so $100 divided by 200 hours is $50 per hour spent cooking in the kitchen. So that's a rate just for the gas bill. And then for electricity bill, I'm going to allocate that based on the number of electronic devices. So I'll take that 90 divided by 120 electronic devices, which is this number right here. Okay, the sum of the electronic devices that all three roommates have. And so that gives me 75 cents per electronic device. So now what I do is to allocate the costs for you, we'll take for the water bill, the 30 showers times $1 per shower. So you're still going to pay 30 of the $40 of the $40 water bill. But now it'll be different for gas and electricity. For gas, since you only use 10 hours spent cooking in the kitchen, that 10 comes from right here. Right, for you, you just spend 10 hours. At 50 cents per hour, that's only $5 of the gas bill. And you can see Chris is going to pay a lot of that. Electricity, you've only got 12 electronic devices, and this 12 comes from this 12 right here. You've got 12 electronic devices. So that's $9. 12 times 75 cents per electronic device is $9. Add all that up, that's $44 that you pay for the total of the utilities. Now, as you look at Pat and Chris, they still pay a small portion of the water bill. But Chris is going to pay the lion's share of the gas bill, and that makes sense because Chris does a lot of cooking and he probably uses most of the gas, assuming you have gas appliances. And Pat has a lot of electronic devices, and so Pat will pay $75 of the $90 electricity bill, and that seems more fair since Pat probably uses more of the electricity. Okay, so in total, we get you paying $44, Pat $91, and Chris $95. The total is still $230, but it's just divided up differently among the three roommates. Hopefully this is more fair. Now you would probably prefer this method. The fairest method is probably this method, but you can probably see that Pat and Chris would be paying more than using this simple method. So they may be opposed to this method unless they were really wanting to be fair, and hopefully they would be. Anyway, this is the key, well, hopefully an example that you can understand that illustrates how activity-based costing is different from traditional costing. Let me give you a conceptual overview. The traditional costing method says, okay, our cost objects, again, are the objects that we're trying to estimate the cost of. It could be the job, it could be a product line, it could be a service, it could be a particular customer, a group of customers, it could be a department. And so traditionally what we do is we take the direct costs, those are easy to assign, only the direct product cost. And then the indirect product costs, we lump those all together, that's like the utilities, and we assign those in proportion to one cost driver. So it could be direct labor hours, right? We calculate this predetermined overhead rate and then allocate the costs in proportion to the amount of direct labor hours used. And then the selling and administrative costs are not allocated. All right, so that's a theoretical overview. Theoretically, how does activity-based costing differ?